I just love the overly dramatic countdown. So hello everyone, thanks for joining. So today I want to show you this new package I've been working on called Arcanist. So the package makes dealing and creating multi-step form wizards in Laravel easy, and so you don't lose your mind, because I've always found them to be really, really annoying to deal with. And since the documentation is still going to take a while for me to finish, but I really wanted to share this. This is what we're going to do today. So here's the plan. I have a, how does this work? No, not this one. Here we go. So I have a more or less brand new installation of Laravel. I say more or less because there is some initial setup I have done, like installing Tailwind and Inertia, just so you don't have to watch me copy and paste stuff from the documentation. But other than that, it's pretty much right as you get it when you run Laravel new. I don't even have Arcanist installed yet. So Arcanist currently isn't published, so I have both the repositories I'm going to use added as local repositories down here. What's this? What does that mean? It's just okay. Let's ignore that. So yeah, it's not currently released. I think I will publish it either. I thought I'd do like a quiet release of a 0.1 version today, or like Monday or Tuesday. I still want to get the getting started section of the documentation to at least be finished before I publish it, but we'll see. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a few multi-step wizards from scratch using Arcanist to kind of show how to use the package, how it works, what you need to do, what the package takes care of. So I'll first do a very simple, straightforward wizard without any really complicated things, and then I'll explain a few of the more interesting things that Arcanist does for you. And if you have any questions or any use cases that you would use this library for, please let me know in the chat, and I'll see if I can like come up with a quick and dirty solution on the spot to kind of show how I would do it with Arcanist. That means it's also possible that you have like some use case that currently isn't possible to do with Arcanist. I would actually consider that a success of this screen if I find out like how like things I have missed in the package, but we'll see. So please feel free to write things in chat so I don't feel like a crazy person just talking to myself. Okay, cool. So first thing we need to do is let's install it. So composer require Laravel Arcanist, because Arcanist is already taken, unfortunately. So here we go. And now, yeah, screen sharing. Even installing a local package is taking forever. So, dude, are you serious? What is Arcanist? Okay, so glad you're here. I don't know how you found the stream, but so Arcanist is a package I've been working on for Laravel. That kind of I just wanted to solve like multi-step wizards where you have like step 1, step 2, step 3. And you want to like preserve state between those steps. So if you accidentally close your browser and reopen it, you don't have to start all over again. I've always found this really annoying, and I just wanted to solve it once and for all. Initially for something I did at work, but then I thought this is actually kind of cool. And so I decided to publish it. Or I plan on publishing it. Hello, Patrick. How did you find this stream? Okay, so next thing we need to do is we need to publish the config file So you might see there's also migrations. We'll not publish them for now. I'll talk about that in a second. We're just interested in the config. So that created a Arcanist PHP file that has a bunch of stuff in here that I'm not going to talk about now. We'll come back to these things as they become relevant. So I think the easiest way to do this is to actually just create a wizard, and then I'll sort of talk you through the different parts, how everything works as I'm writing it. So it might be a bit tedious at times to like watch me type out a bunch of stuff, but I feel like it's more useful overall if I actually do this from scratch rather than like copy and pasting massive chunks of code just to speed things up. So I have over here in my browser, I have like a very basic skeleton template that we're going to use for this. It is this, no, it is this one. That's the template. And then on the index page, you'll see that in a second, don't worry about it. Pay no attention to this inertia base file for now. So I'm going to create a new folder in my app directory called wizards. Arcanist doesn't really care what you call this, so you can do whatever you want. And in here, I'm actually going to create another directory because every wizard in Arcanist has multiple files. So I think it makes sense to group them like this. But again, it doesn't really matter. So I think as a first example, I'll do a very simple like sign up form. So let's call this sign up wizard. And when I sign up, and then in here, we want to have a sign up wizard class. So there will be like generator commands for all of these things. So you can do like artisan make wizard. When I publish this package, they're currently not finished. So that's why I have to do it all manually. So every wizard needs to extend from this abstract wizard class that comes with Arcanist. And for now, let's just fill out 3 pieces of information. The first one is every wizard has is it title or name? It's title. Every wizard has a title. So the title is like a human readable title, right? So like create a new account. We'll talk about where this even shows up a bit later. Second thing is we need a slug. So let's call this, I don't know, sign up. So the slug does multiple things. First of all, it's used in the actual URL, so it serves as an actual slug. And it also is used to find like certain files based on a convention that I'll show you in a second. And the last thing we need is every wizard has, of course, a bunch of steps. So for now, let's just put this here. We don't have any steps yet, but this is where they would go. And that's the basic skeleton of our wizard. Now, the next thing we need to do is to actually register this wizard so Arcanist knows about it. So let's go back to the config file. And there is a wizards array down here. And this is where we need to add our, what did I call it? Sign up wizard. Okay, so now that we have it registered, if we take a look at our routes, I can never remember if it's route or routes. I think it's routes. So compact. Oh boy. My computer is just dying. Nope, it is route. I swear. It's just like a USB stick. Like I always try it wrong the first time around. So what we can see is that we now have a whole bunch of routes that are called wizard/sign up something. And they all point to this sign up wizard class that we just created. You probably will never have to worry about these routes. Okay, this is something that Arcanist is going to use internally, but just so you know that they're there. And here you can see this is where the slug shows up. So every wizard gets its own set of routes registered. So there's not like a catch-all route for all wizards, but each wizard has their own set of routes. All right, so a wizard with any steps isn't really useful. So I'm just going to create 3 steps for now, and then we'll fill them in later. So I am going to create another folder here. And again, feel free to do this differently. So let's think about 3 steps. I don't want to make this too complicated, so you have to watch me like type out a bunch of boring stuff. So let's do 3 steps. The first one is just like enter username step. I specifically want to leave out password yet because that's actually a bit more interesting than it might seem, and I'm going to come back around to this later. So for now, it's just enter username. Let's create 2 more. The second one is, I don't know, select or choose subscription, maybe. And then the last one is like a confirmation step. Please check your data again to see if that you haven't made any errors. So this is like confirm step. Okay, now each step in a wizard. So first of all, let's just register them. And the order in which you list them in this array is actually relevant because this is how Arcanist knows, well, the order of the steps, right? Because Arcanist does on its own does sort of redirection. Once you finish one step, it'll redirect you to the next step. And the order is actually what determines that. So we want to first have the user enter a username. So that's the one we'll do first. Then we have choose subscription. And then finally we have confirm. Okay, so now for each step, let's take the enter username. They need to extend from this wizard step class. And similar to a wizard, each step has a, I think, is it name, is it title? I keep forgetting. It is title, it's name. Has a name, pick a username. And then it also has a slug, I don't know, username. Let's just extend from this class everywhere. Wizard step. No, not this one. This one. Did I make the same mistake over here? I did. I'm spoiling things. You weren't supposed to see that yet. This one. And then finally, this one. Okay, let's just fill this in before I forget. So string name is looking good because we're like young and hip, and this is how young people speak. So I've been told. And this is a confirm. And then the choose subscription is choose a subscription, I guess. Subscription. All right. Now, subscription. So, wow, it's impressive. I made the exact same typo. Okay, now let's take a look at what we got. So right off the bat, we can see that the 2 of the 3 different components that make up a wizard. One is the wizard itself. That's kind of it just groups everything together. The second one are the steps, and the third one we'll see a little bit later. So we already saw that we have a bunch of routes that got registered. So if we now go to the browser, and on this index page, I just grab all the registered wizards from the config and just display their title, right? So we can see what we're working with. And now this button, I don't know if you can see it on screen on the bottom left, it says /wizard/signup. If I click this, we're going to get an error. So, no template found for step. Okay, this is the first interesting bit. So, Arcanist does not provide any front end whatsoever. There's no templates you can use, there's no scaffolding. In fact, Arcanist doesn't even care what you use to render your template. If you use Blade or Inertia, I'm not entirely sure how it would work with Livewire, but from my understanding, it's basically Blade, so I think that would work. And also there's no sensible default I could provide for a template because it's going to be so specific to your application, what it's going to look like, how it fits in with existing views, what the UX is supposed to be like, right? So there's really no point in me providing you with a default. Instead, what Arcanist does, it just tries to provide as much information and metadata about the wizard so that you can implement basically any view you want. So let's try and solve this problem first. So back in our, yes, you can. There's a question about could we translate the title? You can. So since this is a property, you can't like do this. You can't put an expression here. You can, if that's what you need to do, I actually have to double check. I'm pretty sure there is there's a method, there's a protected method title that you can override instead. And then you're inside a method, right? And you can use like the translation helpers, for example. I actually had this use case from the very beginning. That's why I thought of this. So you would, let's see, title, not get title. Why doesn't this? Are you kidding me? Did I make this private? No, it's protected. Okay, the autocompletion just doesn't like me. So you would override it, and then you could basically do this stuff in here. That's for the wizard, and I think it works the same way for steps. And if it doesn't, I will know it doesn't, but it should, so I'll fix that. Okay, so what's the template error? Okay, so in our config file, there is a section called renderers. So I said earlier that Arcanist doesn't care about, let me remove this, doesn't care about what you use to render your front end. So out of the box, Arcanist provides a blade response renderer, which returns like a blade response, right? You can also see there's an inertia one down here. I'll get to that in a second. That's not part of the core package. You have to install a separate package for that. That's only because I didn't want the core package itself to have a dependency on the inertia if you're not even going to use it. But there is like a first-party implementation of inertia as well. So the way the blade response renderer works, it's trying to resolve the template based on a convention. So the convention is it looks in resources views, and then whatever path is specified here, so in this case it's wizard, so it would look for a directory called wizards in here. And then it would take the slug of the wizard as a directory. So we would be in views, wizards, sign up, and then it would use the slug of the step as the file of your template. So username.blade.php. That's how it's trying to resolve it, and that obviously doesn't exist, so that's why we get this template error. So if we now create this, let's do wizards. Can I actually do this? Sign up. That works. Okay, cool. And let's do, no, not file. Username, blade.php. And let's at least extend from app, so to section. By the way, if someone can explain to me the difference between end section and stop, I would be very happy. I've never understood what the difference was. So hi from username.blade.php. Now, if I didn't mess it up, and if I refresh this, now it returns the template. Now it correctly renders the template. Okay, so now we have a template, but what do we actually do here? So every view in Arcanist gets passed two variables. The first one is wizard. So if we dump this and look at it, here's what we get. This might be very tiny. No, I don't want to print. I want to, why doesn't this work? Okay. So that's what's inside this wizard variable. And it's basically like the metadata about the wizard itself. You can see this is the slug we specified, this is the title, and it has an array of steps. And each step in this array, again, has a bunch of metadata. It has the slug, and here's where it gets interesting. It has this Boolean that says, has the step been completed yet? And it also has a Boolean that says, is this the step that is currently active, right? Because in your view, you probably want to highlight the step you're currently on, and you might want to display like a green checkbox, so check mark, next to steps that have been completed already. So, and then as URL, which is currently all null, it's null because we don't actually have an existing wizard yet, right? So all of these URLs, they need an existing wizard because you can't like skip ahead to step 3 on a new wizard. You need to start at step 1. So as soon as we finish step 1, these URLs will actually have values. And so with this information, you would build up your UI. So I'm gonna show you like really quickly how you could do it, and then I have prepared a few Blade components so you don't have to watch me write HTML for half an hour. So here's what you could do. All right, so let's just do this in this template directly. So what you could do is you have, for example, on every step, you want to render this this list of steps, right? Like 1 is enter username, 2 is pick subscription, 3 is confirm, right? You want to show that on every step. So you have that information, right? You could do for each wizard, and then steps as step. You could render something like this. I'm not going to even style it, but just so you know what I mean, let's do this, and then like I plus 1 plus 1, and then we have wizard, and this is where you would use like the name of the wizard, right? Sorry, not the wizard, the step. I'm pretty sure that I messed this up, and it's called title on the wizard and name on the step. So that's something I have to fix because I keep tripping up on this. So what was it? Was it title? I think it was title. So let's just do this for now. Undefined array key title. No, I actually did it wrong. It is name. Man, what a great API. It's so intuitive. Okay, so it's name. Right, so you could display them, and then you could use like the just if statements, right, to check if the current step has been completed, and then like do some different styling. Like at this point, it really doesn't have anything to do with Arcanist anymore. It's just a template, right? You have a bunch of data, and then you could render a different template. So what I would suggest you to do is, because you probably want all your wizards to look the same, so what I have done in this case is I've created just a bunch of Blade components that I'm going to use. So I have this wizard component, which gets passed the wizard. I think that's how that works. Hi. So let's see if I got this right. Yeah, so this is, I just want to emphasize, this template has nothing to do with Arcanist. It is just normal Blade, right? This is just an example of how you could use this metadata that gets passed to the template to build whatever view you want. I'm not sure what's going on down here. But you can see, like, I'm styling the currently active thing differently, right? It's highlighted. I also have, let me just show you what this template looks like so you have some idea of what I mean. So, okay, this is bothering me. Why is this so tiny? Looks like it's wrapped twice. Oh my god. Everything's so slow. Why is this so tiny? Oh, I think because it's not growing. Can we do this? Oh, I have Tailwind JIT, so wait, let me just do that. And I have to start mix and hope my computer doesn't go up in flames. Right. But basically, it renders this wizard step list, which is yet another blade component. And I'm passing it the steps, right? Because that's the part that's going to be the same for every wizard and for every step. So I can like completely generalize this. And then I just render like all the metadata of the wizard. One thing you can see here is I've actually included the form inside the blade component itself, so that in my step templates I don't have to. I am now inside a form tag, right? So everything I write in here is inside a form, so I don't always have to write the same thing. Another thing you might have seen is that I do this in the form, because by convention, if we look at the routes again, you can see that the get and the post endpoint use the same URL. This is done specifically so you can just do that, right? You don't have to know what the current wizard is called. You don't have to include the slug. You can just say like post to the current URL. So like as much as possible, I try to like generalize things so that they would work for every wizard in every step. So you can just post to the current URL. Okay, so let's just write a simple form here. Let's see if this actually fixed it. Well, it's different. Okay, this is good enough. So let's do like a, I don't know, one of these panels. So something like that, I guess. Sure, sounds good. And then let's do, so this step, we want to collect the user's username, right? So we have a single input field. Let's do two. Something like that. Gray, I don't know, 600. Yeah, sure. So this is for username. And then it's called username. And then we have an input here. I think I've installed the form plugin for Tailwind, so I don't have to style it as much. So this is username. Okay, let's leave it like that for now. Oh, did I actually? Oh yeah, the CSRF tag is also in the component. Okay, so now that we have that, oh yeah, that looks fantastic. That's exactly how I wanted it to look. Oh man, so something like that. Maybe like this, like that, and like this. I know styling isn't important for this demo, but it just bothers me. I have to at least get it to not look completely like shit. No, this is still not what I want, and let's give it a placeholder. Why is this so fucking massive? Sorry, stand by. Let's do. Why is this placeholder so massive? Goddamn. Anyways, so assuming we have this thing, what happens if I submit this? Because we haven't actually, either in our wizard or in our step, we haven't written any like form handling logic. So what happens? Let me think what is going to happen. Okay, we're going to get an exception for a completely unrelated reason. Something about the table not existing. Yep. Okay, so now we can talk about that. So Arcanist keeps track of the state of a wizard, right? And there's a couple of ways it can do that. One is in a table. So if that's the route that you want to go, you have to publish the migration that comes with Arcanist, which will create this wizards table. But there's another way. So if we go back to the config file, there's a section about storage. And it currently is using this database wizard repository as its driver. As the name implies, this is just using Eloquent to save like a wizard model to the database, which is why we're getting this exception because we haven't run the migration. I'm actually not going to use this now, but I want to show you that there's actually multiple ways you can do this. And out of the box, Arcanist provides two ways. One is the database wizard repository. The other one is the cache wizard repository, which just uses whatever you have configured as your cache. So in this case, there's a couple of nice things that that happen. You can see this TTL thing here. So TTL is time to live. Because as soon as you keep track of, like you persist the state of the form between steps, it means you have to now save it somewhere, right? And that's one of the things that always bothered me about like these multi-step forms when I used to implement them, is you end up with a lot of these half-finished records because like someone started the form and then just closed the browser and never came back. And now you have this half-finished record in your database that never really goes away, and I hated that. So that's why there's this TTL thing that basically determines like how long can a wizard go without an update before it's considered expired and can be deleted. So in the database, with the database wizard repository, this looks at the updated at column of the table. And this is in seconds, so this is like a day. So if the wizard hasn't been updated in a day, you would consider it like expired or abandoned. And then there is a command that ships with Arcanist that you can register in your scheduler that will delete like these rows from the database. The nice thing about the cache wizard is you have the cache repository is you have this like expiration thing that more or less built in. So it's just using this this expiration, this TTL, as the expiration date of the cache entry, right? So it just automatically expires. That's one of the nice things about the cache wizard repository. And I think it's a safe assumption or fair assumption that these like wizard records that are being kept are fairly short-lived because you expect people to like actually finish the wizard, right? At which point it's going to get deleted. So I feel like a day is like reasonable. You could probably do this shorter as well, but it's like this auto cleanup thing that Arcanist does because that's one thing that has always really bothered me. Okay, so now that we switched to the cache wizard repository, we should no longer get this table thing exception. So what do we get now? Okay, we get another like no template found, but it's the next step. So things actually seem to work out. And if we look in the URL, we can now see this UUID up here because we're now dealing with an existing wizard. Okay, so we have created, in this case in the cache, like an entry, assigned it a UUID, and this is how Arcanist is now keeping track of the state. So if we now go back to the first step, which is username, I believe. There's obviously a problem because we're not actually showing the username that you've provided previously. Okay, so let's move to the next thing. So in our step template, in our step class, I said that there are two variables that Arcanist passes to every view. One is wizard, we saw that one. And the second one is data. And if we dump what's inside data in here, it's just going to be an empty array. That's because we're not actually passing any data to this template. So wizard is kind of the wizard data itself. So that's the same for all steps. And data is the step-specific view data that only gets passed to this template. And the way you specify this is in our step class, there's a function called view data. And in here, you can just return like some array. And this array will then get passed to your view and will be available as this data variable. So if I just like hardcode something in here and we refresh, then that's what's going to be inside this data property, right? So this is basically like what you do in your controller. When you say like return view and then the second argument is the data that gets passed to the view, that's what this function is. So if we want to, one thing we want to do is we actually want to pass in the whatever value the user has previously entered for the username if there is something, right? So how do we access data that has already been saved? So we want to return like a username. And the way you access the data in a wizard is you say this data, and you pass it some key, and it's going to look up whatever has been saved for that key yet, which right now is still going to be null. So the reason this is null, because we still haven't really implemented any sort of like form handling in here, right? So how does Arcanist even know what data it should save? This is something, shoutouts to Nova, that I stole from Nova. In your step, there is a function called fields that you have to override. You don't have to, only if the step actually has like a form, right? So our confirmation step probably won't even have this method implemented because it's only going to display like existing data. It's not going to collect any new data. And in here, you say field make, and then in this case, username. And like these two things have to map, right? Like this returns something because we've used the same key down here when we specify the field. And the same way you do this in Nova, you can say rules and say, yep, this is required. So now what happens if we go back and we try and submit this form without entering anything? It looks like nothing changed, but that's because we're not actually displaying any of the validation errors yet. So let's go to this, to our template, and do like, I don't know, error, username. And again, this is just like normal Laravel validation stuff, right? It's using the same mechanisms behind the scenes. And error, then this. And let's do like text red 500, something like that. And then this. So if I try this again, right now we get our validation error. So that's one thing that Arcanist does. You kind of specify what your rules are, but all the like validation handling itself gets taken care of behind the scenes. What this fields thing also does is by telling Arcanist, hey, this step has a field called username and it's required, Arcanist will now use this information to know what data it should save if the form gets submitted, right? It will take this data from the request, validate it, and then save the validated data. So whatever fields you specified in here is what Arcanist is going to try and save from the incoming request. So if we now say, this is my username, okay, we're back to this template error, right? Because that template still doesn't exist. But if we now go back and look at what what our data thing has, it now contains what we entered previously, and we can display it here. I'm actually confused why it's... Did I? One second. Yeah, this should be empty because we don't actually pass it in here yet. So you could do like value and then grab it from data username. Right, and now it's like pre-filled when you go back to a step. Okay, so now let's move on to the next step, the choose subscription one. So let's create this template. And again, the convention is it uses the slug of the step as the file name. So the next slug would be choose subscription. That's just subscription file subscription blade PHP. Let's just copy and paste this stuff, and then instead of doing this, let's just get rid of that for now. Okay. So let's refresh and hit next. And again, you can see this step is now marked green, right? Because in my Blade component that renders the step list, I just checked this is completed property of the step. And so I can render it differently. And this is going to work for any wizard in any form because it's like implemented in a completely generic way. So, okay, so another thing you might notice is that I can now like click on the previous step and navigate back and forth like that. That's also done generically because if you remember, let me just dump wizard here. If you remember in the steps array, every step has a URL, right? So you can use that information when rendering this list to make these things clickable as soon as you have like something to click on, right? So this is all completely generic. The step list, in case you're curious, is just that. Okay, it's another component. So the wizard step has this weird like if else because I don't want it to be clickable. I don't even want it to be an anchor tag if there is no URL. So I'm just rendering a div in that case. But apart from that, like this is just stuff that gets computed in the actual Blade component class, right? Again, this is not Arcanist specific in any way. It's just plain Blade. I have this data array and there's just a bunch of if statements, and this will work for everything. Okay. Now that we have this, by the way, you might be wondering what happens if I click on step 3 now. Wait. Hold on. Get rid of that. So what happens if I click on this? Nothing happens because it knows that, no, you haven't completed step 2 yet. So it's redirecting you back to the first step that hasn't been finished yet. Right, so I can't click on step 3. You can see up here it's loading, but it's redirecting me back to this step because this isn't finished yet. So that these are like the kinds of details that it just takes care of for you. Now let's do something a bit more interesting. So choose subscription. Now in our step, let's say fetching subscriptions, like the subscriptions the user is able to choose from is kind of determined at runtime, let's say. Okay, so I can't just hard code some data that gets returned. Well, I can. Let's do that for now. Let's just hard code this and do return subscriptions, or let's call it plans, and then just hard code a few plans, and let's say this is like the free plan. It has a name. I'm gonna bet you I'm gonna call title in a second in the template. It's free. It has a price of 0, and its description is our most popular plan, wouldn't you believe it? Let's do a second one down here and call this is the sucker plan. It costs 4,900 some currency, and it's all the same features as the free plan, but I gotta pay for it, right? So these are our two plans. And now in our front end, let's just render this so we can select that. Let's do a, I don't know, do a grid. Is it calls or call? Grid calls, grid call 3, okay, 4. And for each. So remember, this is part of the data variable, so we can grab that with data plans as plan. And then do that P6, I don't know, that's fine. And then let's do like a title here, font bold, and render plan. Is it title or is it name? I think it's name. Yes. And then let's do the description here. We go, I don't know, 700, like that. And then render this. Let's see. But that's not what so it's calls, plural. Damn it. Okay, and now we want to make them selectable. Oh, this looks like shit. I don't like this. And this is like completely irrelevant to the demo, but it just bothers me if it doesn't look good. It still doesn't look good, but slightly less bad. And then do like a massive, I don't know, text 6XL, font bold, text, yeah, and then do plan. Let's do like number format. Take the price. I have no idea what the API of number format is. Decimals, 2 decimal separator. Yeah, it looks, I think that's fine. And then let's do euros. Okay. Yeah, okay. Looks fantastic. You know what, let's make this 5. Okay, and now we want to make it selectable, so I'm going to write some really bad HTML now, because I don't think this is valid HTML, but I want the whole thing to be clickable. So this is 4, because I want to have a radio button, and I want the whole card to be clickable, and I can't be bothered to figure out how to do this correctly. So this is going to be like selected plan, that's what we're going to call the field. And so let's do a relative, and then it's like position a input. This is type checkbox. No, it's type radio. And it's absolute top 0, right 0, maybe like that. And then this has I can never remember how like radio buttons work. I think the ID needs to be the thing that's different, and then the name has to be the same, so they belong to the same group. So like plan, I think they have an ID, and then name, or is it the other way around? Selected plan, but I think this actually has to be that, I think. Okay. Why is my margin not working? That's why. Okay, so now so that works. And if I submit it, it's not going to work because I haven't actually declared the field in the backend yet. So let's go back to our step. And so choose subscription step and do fields. I have 18 viewers. how do I run like ads again? I want my 2 cents. Okay, so fields. We have field make. I called it selected plan. I want this to be required, and I'm just going to hardcode this for now. But now you could do something like rule in, I believe, and then say it needs to be like one of the valid. It's like ID. Sorry, it's either free or sucker, right? It has to be one of those two. So let's see, if I refresh it, don't select anything. I'm on the same step, but I'm not showing the error yet. So let's just add that for now. So let's do error selected plan. And then do message, but it's going to bother me if it doesn't look good. So let's do bg red 200, something like that. And then px that, py6, px4. Yeah. Sure. Let's see. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so we have validation working, so we have to select something. And now let's select this plan. It's going to complain again that we don't have this template yet, the looking good template. So let's actually do this now because that error is getting a bit old. So let's just say, I think I called it confirm blade, blade PHP. And then let me just grab that. Paste this in here, leave it empty for now. Okay, so we can select it, is invalid. I think I'm using the wrong value for, I'm not using any value, okay. So the value is supposed to be plan ID. I'm gonna get this to work and then I'll have a look at any questions that are in chat. So let's see. Okay, so if I now go back, it's not going to select it because we haven't actually done this in the template yet. But we can do like if plan ID. Let me close this. If plan ID equals data selected plan, we want to make this checked, which still isn't going to work. Selected plan. Yeah, okay. That's not the error I was expecting, but it's because of the same reason. So we're in our step. We're currently only passing plans. We're not passing what has been like saved previously, right? In the username step, we did that explicitly by doing selected plan, and then you had to do this data and selected plan, and that would work. I hope. Whoops. Right, so it's selecting the correct thing again. However, this is going to get really tedious. Like imagine you have a step that has, I don't know, like 12 fields. And you pretty much always want to like send the data to the view, like the data that has been previously entered should always be available to the view, right? Because you want to like pre-fill all those fields if you go back to that step. So having to do this manually every single time is super tedious. So what you can do instead is you can say, instead of returning an array, you can say this with form data, and then pass in only the extra bit of information. So what this will do is it will do what we just did manually, where we say like, okay, selected plans is equals this data, selected plans. It's going to do that for all fields you have defined, and then merge it together with the thing you provide in here. And this is actually the default implementation of this function in the base class. So we could just delete this in the first step, because we're not providing any extra data. So if we now navigate back, that still works, right? Because it's the default implementation. Okay, so the thing that I actually wanted to show you is, oh wait, let me take a look at you. So there's a question here. A use case, I have, say, a form to add a music file, and I need to either choose a producer or add a new one if the one I want doesn't exist. How are you able to work around that? So, okay, so you want to have like a drop down, and like one of the options is like create new one, and so you do it like inline. I'm not even sure if that is necessarily a concern for the package, because that could just be like a JavaScript component or a Livewire component that does like something completely separate. Like sends its own post request outside of the context of Arcanist. The only problem with that is probably like if you don't do it correctly, you might lose your current state. Like if you do a full page refresh, for example. But I think that is something, we can try that like later on, but I think that is something you can just implement in userland, like by having this part of your form just be like its own either Livewire or view component that just like sends some other request to some endpoint, and then it just refreshes the list and selects that. I think that's not even something. So there are a lot of these cases where I think it's important to understand that not everything needs to be solved by the library, right? A lot of the things can just be solved in userland and don't have to be part of the library. And I think that is like one of those things where it looks like it might be related to the wizard itself, but it's really just like a component that you have on a page that does like that creates a different entity and then refreshes its content so you can select it. So I think that is actually that's not something that the library has to take care of necessarily, but we can try that in a second. Okay, so now I have this hard coded, but let's say like this is actually fetched from some API. Okay, so you can in your constructor define dependencies that get injected automatically. So what you could do, for example, is say you have a subscription service, right? Let's actually just create that really quickly and like put it in, I don't know, services. And it has a function called hello. Get plans, and for now we're just gonna return like the same array that we've hard coded in here. But you could imagine like this could do an HTTP request or anything really, right? But for now we're just gonna move that over here, so we still get back the same thing. And then instead of hard coding it in here, we grab it from the service. Okay, so subscription service, get plans. And if I did it correctly, that should still work the same way. Yeah, right, but now you have like the complete flexibility. This thing can do literally anything. You can inject any service that you need to like retrieve the form data. Again, it's like basically just like how a controller works. All right, now that we've selected a plan, let's finish this up. So I can talk about the last component that makes up a wizard. So let's keep the confirm thing like really simple. I'm just gonna have a button here. I'm actually not gonna show anything in here because it's boring. So I can just hit next. Like assume it'll show you the data you selected. So what happens if I hit next? One very important concept in Arcanist is, because still we haven't implemented like any custom logic whatsoever. So what even happened in these steps, right? So one really central idea in Arcanist is that the wizard and the steps, they don't actually do anything. they're not, like the choose subscription step is not creating the subscription. The pick a username step is not creating the user. Okay, so none of the actual business logic is happening inside the step or the wizard. Instead, the way you have to think about this conceptually is what the wizard does is it configures a payload. Okay, it just gathers a bunch of information that is necessary to create a new account at the very end. But the creation of the account basically happens after you submit step 3. It's not happening within the wizard. And specifically where that happens is inside an action. So every wizard, in addition to these fields, has a onComplete action that points to some class that will be called once the last step of the form has been successfully submitted. And this is going to be a different action for every wizard. Okay, so in our case, let's just say there is a sign up action. And now let's create that. So in here, let's do, that is the correct namespace. And this action doesn't have to extend from this class, but wizard action. Yes, oh my god, okay, wizard action. Why is everything so slow? Wizard action. Okay. And then action has an execute method, gets some payload, and has to return an action result. So for now, let me just do return this success. Don't worry about that for now. So what's going to happen is once you submit the last step in a wizard, what the hell? What is your problem? Undefined class. It is not undefined. Okay. So once you submit the last step, and like the request validation goes through and everything's good, Arcanist will then call this class and pass it some payload. I'll get to that in a second. And this is where the actual business logic is supposed to happen, right? Not in the wizard itself. This has a couple of reasons. So one reason is by separating out the actual business logic, right? The thing that is actually going to be different for every single wizard. By moving this to a completely different class, it now means that the wizard itself is completely generic, right? Because no wizard-specific stuff really happens inside the wizard. It's really just, there's a bunch of fields on this step, and when you submit it, I'll validate it, I'll save the data, I'll move it to the next step, right? So that works the same way for every single step. So I can like implement this completely generically in the abstract wizard class, so you will never have to worry about it. The next thing is that since this is just like its own class that gets some payload and does something, it's really easy to test, right? Because it doesn't really have anything to do with Arcanist anymore. Sure, like the return value is something from Arcanist, but like it's not tied to the form in any way. It's not really tied to the wizard in any way. You can test this as if it's like Arcanist doesn't even exist. So let's just see if I just die and dump payload. I'll get to your question in a second. So if I now submit this last step, don't worry too much about this. This is like an internal thing. But you can see that this action gets passed basically all the data that has been collected throughout the entire form, right? The username and the selected plan. And then it can do its thing of trying to create the user and like book the subscription. But it's moved out of the wizard itself. So in case, so where does this data even come from? Like where does this come from? because you might want to, instead of like having this be an unstructured array, you might want to turn this into like some data transfer object, right? So you have some more, get like auto-completion and whatnot. If you want to customize this, you can in your wizard. There is a function or a method called transform wizard data. Whatever this function returns is what gets passed to the action. Okay, so if we just like hard code, I don't know, blah in here, and we resubmit this form. Whoops. Okay, I removed the die dump, I think. Yeah, well, that was awkward. Let's try that again. Let's do this whole thing again. So this is me. I want the free plan. And next. So now I get this, right? Whatever this function returns is what gets passed to the action. So you can do like a return new like sign up data from raw or something, and then pass in like this unstructured array and like basically return an object or something, right? This is how you can customize that. But by default, it just returns like all the data that has been collected. Okay, so another nice thing about the action is, since this is where the business logic happens, this is where most of the stuff can go wrong, right? Maybe the stripe isn't available or whatever. So how do you do error handling? So you can see this like this success callback down, or this the return value is like this success, and it's supposed to return an action result. Let's say if we do like, let's just simulate something, right? If the username is Kai, then we want to do return this failure, pick a better name. And so what's going to happen now is, let's make sure I actually, that's the username I picked, okay. So if I hit next, okay, so apparently nothing happened. I'm back to the same page, but again, it's because we're not actually showing the error. If you return this failure, Arcanist will internally turn this into just a redirect response, but it'll include it as an error. So you can do something like wizard. That's like the special key that Arcanist puts its errors on. We can just dump it for now. And if I submit it, it says pick a better name, right? So this is how you can do error handling, so it doesn't just throw like 500 exceptions all over the place. You can actually do it nicely, but still in a way that kind of abstracts away all the like annoying things from you. You just say, no, this is return, this was a failure, or this was a success. So if we, let's pick a better name. Let's pick Taylor. So if we now submit this, we get redirected to /home. So we get redirected there because by default in the config there is this redirect URL, and it's just pointing to this home /home in this case. You can change it here. You can also override this on the wizard itself. So one very common use case, I imagine, is let's say you create your action creates some resource, right? Maybe it creates a user, and then you want to redirect the user to like the profile page of that user, but the URL contains the ID of the user, right? So you need some way to pass some data back from the action, right? Let's say you create a user in here, and then inside your wizard you want to say, okay, return to like user.profile with this user ID. So how do you get a hold of the user ID? Well, that's what you pass into the success callback. When you say success, you can pass in an array and say like, I don't know, user, just not Kai. In your wizard class, if you need to customize like the redirection behavior on a wizard level, you can override the on after complete callback. And you can see that it gets passed an action result, which is what this action returns, and it has to return a redirect response. And so here you now have access to, you can say get user, and then you can do like return redirect route user's profile, and then do like result get user. Right, so this is how you can pass some data that was only created in the action back to the wizard, so you can then redirect to a resource-specific route. Okay, so that's kind of an easy wizard that doesn't really have many complicated bits. It's just very straightforward, collect a bunch of data, and at the end, it gets handed off to some class that does the actual work, and then we redirect somewhere. Now, let me look at the chat. So, another use case. Let's assume our plans depend on the name. Yes, thank you. Thank you. That was exactly where I was going for. Okay, I'm pretty sure you were there in like some previous stream because that sounds suspiciously familiar to me. Okay, so yeah, this is a very common request. When I asked on Twitter, like, give me like examples of multi-step forms, and especially like ones that are a bit more complicated than just next, 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 finish. And the most common response by far was, I have dependent fields. Like some field in this step depends on a value in this step. So we want to show different data depending on what you selected in a different step. Let me actually use this example to show you how Arcanist deals with this. So let's say in our choose subscription step, instead of saying, well, subscription service get plans, the plans that we actually get back depend on some value that was previously entered. So in this case, let's say the username, okay? And let's just pretend that the service has a, this get plans method accepts the username, which remember you can access by saying this data, right? So you could say this data username, and let's now change this. And this is, and then like just to pretend that this, there's actually some complicated logic here, we're just gonna say like if the username is Kai, then they can only get back the sucker plan. Whoops. Okay, so with just that change, if I did that correctly, let's say I am, okay, cannot access offset because I did something wrong. This data, username, and then this. Oh yeah, this needs to be like one level deeper. Okay, whoops. Refresh, and now we only see this plan. If I go back and I say I am totally not Kai, now I see other plans. So far so good. Like that wasn't a difficult change, right? Because you can view data as just a function, right? You can do whatever you want in here. You can have a bunch of if statements in there. The thing that is now that makes this complicated is these two fields now have a dependency, right? So what happens if I say, well, I'm Kai. Wait, sucker? Wait, no, I don't like this. So I'm totally not Kai. I'll select the free plan. And then I go back and change my username to Kai. Don't care that it's no longer shown, but it's still selected in the background. Skip to step 3, and I've selected a plan that I wasn't supposed to be able to select. So what should have happened was as soon as I changed this username, if I've already picked a subscription, that input should have been invalidated, right? Because there's a dependency here. As soon as this changes and I have a field that depends on this value, that field needs to be invalidated. And luckily, that is really easy to do. So you would also like probably have to adjust the validation rule depending on, right? But again, I feel like this is like user-land stuff. Like how would you do this in a controller? Do it the same way here. But if you have a case like this where you say, okay, the selected plan depends on the username. If you change the username, you have to reselect your plan. You can do that by saying depends on, and then you say username, right? And so this string maps back to this string, but on the username field. So by doing that, if I, let's say I select this, now I go back and I am not Kai, it invalidated my selection. I can't just click next anymore. Okay? And if we go back, you can see that choose subscription is no longer completed. So again, if I go to Kai, select this, now choose subscription is done. Now I go back, change my name to not Kai, select this, go back. This is the way I want to do it. So now I have selected free, changed my name back to Kai, and if I now try to hit next, it won't let me because it actually invalidated that selection. It unset whatever you have previously selected because we've declared a dependency between those two fields. And Arcanist noticed that username changed, so it invalidated all the fields that depended on that, and it also marked the step as not completed. Right? So if I go back, choose a subscription is no longer completed, which means I can't also skip ahead to step 3. It automatically redirects me to step 2 because it knows, no. There is a step before step 3 that hasn't been completed yet. You can't go there. So this, I think, is a super cool thing because it's something you might not like really think about. Sure, it's like one thing to display like different data because it's just a bunch of if statements, but you immediately have to like take care of like invalidating this field if you change the dependent field. But Arcanist just does that under the hood, and you never have to worry about it. You just declare the dependency, and then as soon as you change this field, it takes a look at, okay, what other fields are depending on this value, and then it invalidates them. So the user will have to reselect them. So does that answer your question? This, I think, is one of the coolest things in this, because it is really easy to mess up, and it's just so nice to just declare it, right? And then never have to worry about it again. So let me, because Arcanist does a lot of the redirection handling, that isn't really quite obvious if you only have 3 steps. So let me show you what happens if you have a couple more steps. So let's just copy and paste this and call it like bonus round. So this is bonus round, extends wizard step, bonus round, bonus round. Don't care about that. Don't care about that. But I need some template for this. Bonus round, blade. Yeah, looks good. And now let's register that. Okay, refresh. Because the template is written in such a generic way, that just automatically like updates the step list. So one thing I want to show is the only step that is currently finished is step 1, right? No other step is finished. So I can, for example, skip ahead to step 3. It just like redirects me to the first step that hasn't been finished. Let's finish that. Also finish looking good. And now let's do like the invalidation thing. So let's go back to username, change that. So now we have this state. This is complete. This is complete. Step 2 isn't complete. Step 4 isn't complete. So I cannot skip to step 4. It'll redirect me to step 2. But I can go to step 3 because it has been completed before. The thing is, I actually hope this works. I'm not entirely sure if I hit next. Yeah. But I can't like move to step 4. Even if I submit step 3, instead of redirecting me to the next step, it says, no, you have to go back here because you haven't actually finished this, right? You can't skip ahead. So it's like this weird kind of redirection handling, taking care of, okay, is the step finished? Can I even view this step yet? That Arcanist just does on its own, which I think is really cool because then you don't have to worry about, like if some step got invalidated, you don't have to be worried that the user can still somehow submit the form because they like clicked on the link up here. Arcanist won't let you, right? You can't skip ahead. Okay, so let's see, are there any other questions? And I just want to show again that we haven't really written any code, right? This is like just configuration. There's no logic in here. All this behavior that I just showed, we just got for free by just either declaring a dependency or, just like marking fields as required or not. This all just works out of the box. So, let's see. So yeah, there's something about the TTL. Let me actually show that one. So we currently have an existing wizard, right? And the TTL is, by default, it is set to a day. So like just to illustrate, let's move this to, I don't know, 5 seconds. And then like refresh it, like submit some field to update the timestamp, and let's wait a few seconds. And then hopefully, if I refresh, it doesn't exist anymore, right? Because the TTL, it expired, so it automatically got cleaned up. So that's what the TTL does. And if you use the database repository, there is a cleanup expired wizards command that you can schedule that does the same thing, but for like the database. Even if it does not depend on the username. Can we force invalidation of step 3? Can you give me a use case of that? Like why would I want to invalidate step 3 if it doesn't depend on it? So the question is, if I have this state, so I have 3 finished steps, and now I go back and like change the username, which would invalidate step 2. So the question is if it could also now invalidate step 3, even though step 3 doesn't have an explicit dependency on the username field. And I can't quite think of an example of why you might want that. Because invalidating means it just deletes whatever the user has entered before, right? So one thing you might be able to do, it's an interesting question, like when you have like chained dependencies, like let's say subscription depends on username, and then like some field on step 3 depends on subscription. I don't think it would cascade at the moment, but it probably should, which is making this a whole lot more complicated. But I think it would be, that's what you would expect to happen, that the invalidation would cascade. Can you skip a step? Not by default. Well, not by default. No, you can't. If a step is optional, you would just not mark the fields as required in your validation rules. So you can just click next, but you still have to go through it. So if I, for some reason, want to say like, you don't have to pick a subscription, what you would do in that case is in the choose subscription step, instead of making this required, I think, what is it, nullable? I'm not even sure if I have to specify this at all. Can I do this? And then let's make it not depend on this. So let's see. Pick a username. I can't unselect this. Let's just start a new one. So you would pick a username, and then you can just hit next. That would still mark it as complete, right? You still have to go through it, but you can just make all the fields not required, which essentially means you can skip it, right? But it's like, by treating them all this, like, I have to make some assumptions. Like, this is an opinionated package, right? So I'm making a few assumptions, one of which is you can't just like completely skip a step without ever going through it. If you want to have like optional steps, you would simply make the fields not required. And then you just can hit next. But internally, Arcanist still knows that, yeah, you have finished this one. So, how long have we been going for? 1.5 hours. Still 14 people watching. Okay, now, I'm surprised no one has mentioned this in chat. I kind of said that a step is not performing any business logic. But there are cases where you might have to do that, right? So one thing could be that during this account creation, the user is supposed to upload a file, like an avatar. And you actually have to handle that right then and there, right? Because you have to save the file. You can't delay that. You can't push that back. So how, like, if you have to do some additional work other than just saving the data, how do you do that? So this is possible. It's just like not, I wouldn't say it's not recommended. It's just like try to avoid this if you can, because it makes things a bit more complicated. But sometimes it's unavoidable. So if you need to customize the behavior of a step, let's say there is a method called, I think it's process. No, it's not process, it's handle. Handle, right. You can override this method. This method gets the validated payload from the request, okay? Like everything that's in here, you can assume has been validated using these rules. And it needs to return a step result. That's basically the same as this action result, but just for steps. So if you need to do like some request, like file and then file saved, like whatever it's called, I don't know, store as blah, blah, blah. If you need to do something like that, you can do that in here. And this is actually an interesting thing, because the information you want to save is probably going to be the path of the file after it got stored, right? So how do you actually make sure that that's what's being stored and not like the file object. So similar to how the action result works, you can do return this success and pass in some payload. And whatever this thing is what Arcanist will save. Okay, so you can just do like store this file somewhere. Blah. And then I think this gives you back the path. Does it? String or false? Yeah, fine. And then you can say, well, so the file is actually the path, and then I want to return the payload. And now Arcanist will like save the path in this files key. So if you then do like this data files, you will get back the path of the image that you uploaded. And similar to how you can return an error in an action, let's say like the upload fails for some reason, right? So if path is false, you can do return this error. Okay, it's inconsistent. Could not upload file. And again, Arcanist would handle that response internally, and you can then, it would redirect back to the step and populate the wizard's key in the error bag. Okay, so you can do some additional business logic inside a step if you absolutely have to. But in most of the cases, I would suggest you to like push back as much as the work as possible. Because now, for example, what happens if the user now never finishes the wizard? Okay, the wizard itself will get cleaned up eventually, but the file is still there. Right, so now you have to take care of this on your own because you kind of like deviated from the assumptions that Arcanist make. Right now, you have to make some custom like scheduled job to clean up uploaded files that don't belong to a user or something like that. But there is like an escape hatch, right? If you need to do that. So one example of that I actually have at work is when you, in one of the steps, you select some resource that you want to assign to the user, and that's supposed to be unique, so only a single user can be assigned that resource at the same time, and we want to reserve it as soon as you like save that step of the form, right? So you don't have this weird race condition where two people are filling out the same form, and then whoever saves first is the one that actually will get the resource, and the other one gets some weird error like 3 steps later. That's where we use this sort of escape hatch to like mark this thing as reserved, so when someone else opens the wizard, it won't even appear in the dropdown. Okay, let's see. Here's the example. How would you define the form fields in the classes rather than in the template? Like have a generic template and provide field types and meta in the class. I personally wouldn't, because I don't see a lot of benefit in doing it that way. How would you define the form fields in the classes rather than the template? So instead of like doing in your Blade file, the username one, like having like an explicit input, you just like also have a generic template for this, and then you like loop over like step fields or something like that, and then you like render like field type, something like that. I guess you could do, you currently can't do that because this information isn't passed to the front end. Like you can't do like a type in like, I don't know, password or something, right? This might be something I could consider in the future if that's like a way you want to go. But currently you wouldn't be able to like generalize this. But I found that at least in practice, like the step views, they differ enough to where it's actually a benefit to have them as completely separate templates rather than like a curse, because you can't abstract all the similarities with like either view components or Blade components or whatever. So Yeah. Currently you can't, but I think that would be an addition that's not too difficult. If there's like a lot of need for that. But as I said, I don't think there is a ton of need for that. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the last thing that I want to show. And that's the rendering of templates. So far we've used Blade. But in the config file, you may have already seen this like inertia key. So there is a first-party implementation of an inertia response renderer, because this is actually the original use case that I had. We have an inertia app, and I kind of added the Blade response renderer when I pulled it out into a package, because I didn't want to have inertia as a core dependency. So what you can do is compose a require Laravel Arcanist, Arcanist, and then inertia response renderer, I think. That's why I have already set up inertia in this app. So, oh my god, my PHP storm just is hanging. Okay, and now what you are able to do is say, I want to use, it's indexing, inertia response. Inertia response renderer. Oh my god, this is never going to finish indexing as long as I'm screen sharing. I think it's called inertia response renderer, and then let's import that. So if I now refresh, things are going to crash. Interesting. Oh, because I actually need to. This is interesting. Oh, inertia response renderer. Is that not what it's called? Oh, I think it's actually just Arcanist inertia response renderer. Let's see. Would be really nice to have like auto-completion here. But I don't think this indexing step is ever going to finish as long as I'm streaming. So let's just take a look at inertia response renderer. Arcanist. Inertia response renderer. Inertia response renderer. Is it not discovered package? No, it discovered it. In my defense, I literally wrote this today, so this is weird. Target class doesn't exist. Huh. Interesting. Why is that? Dude, I wish this would stop indexing so I could see if I imported it wrong. But alas. So I had a use case where the actual forms, fields, rules, and so on were created in a CMS, stored in databases. Oh yeah, that's the dream. Like massive generic forms stored as big JSON blobs. So yeah, I think like you could do this if I were to extend the field class with like some extra things you can configure, like name, ID, type. So like all the HTML properties that you might want to pass to the front end. maybe it's just like a generic attributes thing, and then you can just pass in an associative array and then parse that out in the front end. So I think that's, it wouldn't require a lot of changes to make this possible. Okay, so let's try and figure out what's going on. Is the auto-loading set up correctly? So this thing, wait, what? That's the same namespace, that should work. What's going on? Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to show. There's global middleware that all of the wizard routes get wrapped in. That's defined in a config. But you can also override that on the wizard itself. So if you want to have like custom middleware, like in the sign-up wizard, it would make sense to apply the guest middleware to it, right? If you're already logged in, there's no point in you opening this wizard again. You can override the middleware function, static function, and then return like any additional middleware that gets merged together with the global middleware. So you could do guest, and now if I do route list, oh my god, my poor computer. Oh yeah, great. I forgot that just like crashes everything. Let's just undo this for now. So, oh, I think C doesn't show the middleware. Why can't I delete this? Right, so now all the wizard routes have web and guest. So you can configure this globally and on a per wizard level. Oh my god, it would be so nice if this would stop indexing. So I have tested this before, so I know that this works. So what's the issue? So I really want to show this. Blind response renderer. So if it says like not able to resolve it, it means it doesn't get registered, right? Doesn't exist. No, that's an auto-loading problem. Doesn't exist as let's try this again. Arcanist, inertia. Oh wait, there we go. Response renderer. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. I have no idea what just changed. Maybe it was the dump auto-load. This was the exception I was expecting, because now we're back to like no template found. Because of course the inertia renderer uses, like, it tries to resolve a different template, right? It's not trying to render a blade template, it's trying to render a inertia template. But it works pretty much the same way as the blade renderer, but instead of going into resources views, it goes into resources JS, and then inside pages, right? Because that's what inertia looks in first. And then inside pages, it goes into this folder, so wizards. And then it's like the same convention. It's the sign up wizard, sign up, and then it's username dot view, I think. Go away. And then you could do like the hello from inertia. Let's see if this works. I might have to register. Have I registered the? I have, and I've created a separate base blade file that has like this thing, because I didn't want to have like the blade solution and the inertia thing conflict in the demo. So now that we've switched to inertia, at least the first step I think should now work. Or it should show like hello from. Okay, it's empty. That is progress. I think it has to do with the fact that either I messed with the convention, then is not a function. Interesting. So that is somewhere in here. Right, slash pages name. Then is not a function. Huh. Let's see. Man, thank God this isn't live. Pages wizards. The issue might be that it is, I haven't imported that yet. So, layouts, layout. Do I actually have my mix running? Yes, I do. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, so I have messed this up somehow. Oh, this isn't supposed to be required, it's supposed to be import. All right, okay, cool. Now we're inside inertia. So now we're rendering the first step of our wizard, but now we're using the inertia front end. And like, I'm not going to implement the whole scaffolding in inertia. I just want to show you like how the data gets passed to inertia. So one thing I think it's better if I show you in the console. Or in the view DevTools that haven't loaded. There they are. Okay, so page, props, and then there's an Arcanist key, and it has wizard and step. So this is still a bit inconsistent with how the blade one works. In blade, this would be called data. So I'm going to make them both work the same way. But other than that, it's the exact same thing, right? This is just the metadata from the wizard, and this is the step-specific data. So you can access this by doing computed, for example, and then say step, and to like return this page props Arcanist step. And then you can say step username, which is going to be, well, null in this case. Well, this is kind of pointless because it's not even going to show up. But yeah, so it basically works the exact same way, but now we're using inertia. And this is how I use this package at work. We use inertia. What we did to kind of streamline this a bit more is we created a mix-in. So we have like a wizard mix-in. Export default. That has like all these computed fields. So it has the wizard. Oops. That does just return page props, Arcanist, wizard, and then we have step. And another thing we did is we have a URL prop. I think that just does like window location href. So in our wizard page, what we then do is, so we import this, have mixins, wizard, and then say we have like a form down here. like one of those inertia forms. And it has username. We can now do, first of all, we can do like this step username. And then in the, if we have like a, let's do submit prevent, submit. Let's just at least get the first step working. So input vmodel is form username. I think that's good enough for now. And then down here in methods, we have a submit method. And since the convention is that you always post to the route that you're currently on, right? You can just do this form.submit. I think you can leave it empty and it submits to the current URL, or you could like do this. And I think this should work. It's going to throw an exception on the next. Whoa, what's going on here? Username of undefined. This step is undefined. Are you serious? Are you sure about this? Wizard, wizard, computer, okay. Is it though? Wait, why is... It's definitely not undefined. Form username, this step username. What am I missing? What's the error? Form is not defined. Cannot be property, username of undefined. What am I missing of undefined? So this step is undefined apparently. I don't believe you. And then form is not defined. Wait, what? What's going on? Oh, it's not submit, it's post. But that's not this problem. What's this problem? Username, this step, username. Can I just do, just for now? I'm kind of confused. Oh my god. Okay, so username of undefined. Is my thing not recompiling? Let's just restart this. I at least want to get the first form to work to show that it actually works. And then I think we're done, unless there are any other questions. So let's see. What's the problem here? Huh. Have I not set up inertia correctly? No, it's using inertia. Okay, I must be missing something. Can I do... Maybe the mixin is broken. This page props step. Arcanist step username. Let's try that one more time. Is this actually recompiling? I'm sure this is thrilling. Okay, it was a... Wait, what the fuck? Type. I have no idea what just happened. Text. And I wanna know if this was just a cache issue. This step, right? It's picking it up. Username. Nope, back to the same error again. Okay, I don't know what's going on. Something about the mixin. Doesn't matter though. Okay, and then I don't have a submit button. I just realized. Dear Lord. Right, okay, so now we get back the step because it's trying to render the next step. We get back this exception, because the next step doesn't have a view template, but basically the thing works the same way. Like we can see that there is an existing wizard here. So if you go to username, it actually has that data. Oh yeah, so last thing I want to show, because I completely forgot about this. Let's switch back to the Blade one, that's a little less broken. But, so there is an inertia adapter for this, and I know that it works because this is the one that we actually use in production. I just like messed up my setup here somehow. But all the concepts are the same, right? You get past the data from Arcanist, and then you're kind of on your own to like have a wizard layout or something like that. That abstracts all the details. Right, so let's go back to here and say we want the Blade response renderer again. So just to double check. Yep. Okay, one thing I wanted to show is, so right now we have 2 completed steps, right? And let's say the user now closes their browser, unfortunately, but you have this URL, right? You know that this is a wizard that exists. So you can show them like a link on their page. Hey, you skipped this setup step. Do you want to like continue doing it? And so if you just enter this URL without any step slug, Arcanist will automatically jump to the first step that hasn't been completed yet. Right? So if you finish step 3 and now navigate to the wizard URL without a step name, it'll jump to step 4. So it kind of like this resuming a wizard, it jumps to the first step that hasn't been completed yet, so you don't have to like, click next 5 times. Okay, so we're closing in on 2 hours, which I think is a good time to stop. I'll hang around for a few more minutes to see if people have any more questions. But that is basically Arcanist in a nutshell. So the plan is to the package itself I consider feature complete, at least for a version 0.1. There are still a few things that I want to tackle before I tag a 1.0 release. But none of these things really are deal breakers for a pre-version 1 release. I just want to have the documentation at least be complete enough so that the getting started section is complete. And I think that is going to take like 1 or 2 more days to finish. Like the entire documentation is going to take me like a week or 2, I think, to finish. But I think like 1 or 2 more days until there's enough for people to actually get started, and then the more complicated the configuration, they either have to read the source code, write me on Twitter, I guess, or watch back this recording until I finish writing the documentation. Okay. Well, you say you nearly missed it. I'm about to stop, Marvin. So you did, in fact, miss it. So let's see if there are any other questions about this. Thanks. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I think my favorite feature by far is the dependent fields, that it like invalidates things automatically, because that is something that is so easy to mess up. Let's see. Let's look at my face. So I can stop screen sharing so my computer doesn't explode. How to relate a wizard to a user. Yeah, okay. So this is actually, there's a broader question in this one, and that's how do you handle authentication? So this is the question I'm talking about. Because as soon as you have like a persistent wizard state, you want to be able to prevent users just like randomly opening other people's wizards by just guessing IDs, right? Because depending on what the wizard is, it might have sensitive data on it, like API keys or whatnot. So how do you restrict access? This is one of those things that's it's easy to solve for a very specific problem, but it's hard to solve in a package because you kind of have to solve the general case. Because the authorization logic is going to be very different between different applications. For example, I can't assume that you will always have a user, right? Because, for example, in our case at work, we don't want to restrict a wizard to a single user, but to users of the same tenant, right? So as long as you belong to the same organization, you're able to open wizards that other users from your organization have started. So, right, that is a different logic than saying, no, it's always related to a user. You also can't assume that because if you have a registration form, you don't have a user, right? So I can't really solve like these specific cases. What I've been thinking about currently, this is a bit of a problem. That's why this is one of those things that I just mentioned. I want to figure out before I tag a 1.0 release. So my plan is, instead of providing a way of here's how you deal with authentication in Arcanist, I just want to provide you with enough flexibility to hook into like the life cycle of it, so that you can implement like whatever authentication you need. So what I currently have in mind is Arcanist already fires a bunch of events. So when a wizard is saved for the first time, when it's deleted. So you could have an event listener on the like event that gets fired when a wizard gets saved for the first time. So when the actual wizard record gets created. And if you would be able to hook into that and basically just like set arbitrary fields on this data property, right? Let's just say like you have some event listener that listens on the wizard created or creating event, and then you check that, okay, if the wizard doesn't exist yet, so if it's being created for the first time, I want to set the user ID of like request user or something like that. And then you could just write a middleware and grab this data from the wizard and like implement whatever auth logic you want. That currently isn't possible because first of all, you can't set data from outside the wizard. And secondly, because in a middleware, you wouldn't have access to the wizard yet because the wizard kind of gets loaded too late. So that is something that I want to figure out. But that's kind of the solution I'm going for. So there won't really be a section in the docs that says how to deal with authorization in Arcanist, because there's no built-in way to do it. There's more of a, if that is something you need, here's one possible implementation of how you can do it. And then you kind of take that and adjust it to your needs. But currently the API doesn't really allow for that yet. So next question, how about showing different fields in the next step depending on the previous step? Well, again, this is another one of those things where this is not really a package concern because you can just do a bunch of ifs, right? And excuse me. I'm a big fan of not introducing additional syntax if you could just do an if statement. Right? There's nothing really stopping you from, in your template, just saying, oh my God, if data, some key has this value, then render these fields, and then the same for the other ones. Right? And you can do the same with the fields function. It's just a function. You can put a bunch of if statements in there and like conditionally register different fields to change the validation logic and what gets saved, right? I think this is another one of those things. These are the kind of problem where I would be solving very specific problems, but the amount of work they require and the complexity they introduce are like out of proportion, right? Because they make things so much more complicated. For basically, the benefit it gives you is you don't have to write like if statements. And I don't think that trade-off is really worth it. This is a similar, I had a similar discussion about this in Venture, the workflow package that I wrote, where you want to conditionally register commands into a workflow. And I still don't want to introduce like special syntax, because you can just say like, if this, then add job, otherwise don't, right? Because everyone understands that. Okay. I have no idea how much delay is on the stream. It says my connection is unstable. Okay, so if there are no further questions, then I think that's it. We went just a bit over 2 hours. I'll hang around and chat a little longer, just in case the stream delay is longer than I thought and I'm missing some question. When are you planning on releasing it? I plan on releasing it probably in a day or two. It's mostly down to me finishing parts of the documentation, like the getting started section of the documentation. So that's going to take like a day or two, I think. And then I'm going to publish a 0.1 version. All right, cool. Then thanks a lot for hanging out. And I'll hang around the chat for a few more minutes. Otherwise, feel free to write me on Twitter if you have any more questions. Thanks a lot for showing up, and I'll see you around sometime, I guess. All right, see you. Have a good Sunday. Bye-bye. Oh, shit. Just kidding. There's another question. I already clicked on the end broadcast button, so let's do this. And then I'm done. On second thought, I guess on the landing page of sorts, I can just have the various options as different wizards, then have a different wizard for each flow. Yeah, like I would suggest looking for just ways to do this in userland rather than trying to add more stuff to the package, right? Because it increases the maintenance burden, and if not a lot of people are going to use it, it's not a good trade-off. Okay, I'm going to click end broadcast now before someone else asks a question. See you, goodbye, bye-bye.